your guidance, and the permission to open this beautiful moment with one another. And so be it. So, as we were saying earlier, it's good to have our dear friend Julio Padovan here with us today. And Julio, for some of us, for most of us, already know, is a good friend. It's a worker of the Spirit side of Baltimore, even though he lives in New York, right? He is one of the individuals that, as I was speaking, forgive me, Julie, I have to say this, that brings to us some of the knowledge that he likes to share, that he studied, works really hard with it. But it's one of the individuals that puts that thought in our hearts and our minds that it's like, okay, I never thought about that. I didn't see it from this angle, which is really good. That someone who makes us think, right? So beyond being a friend, and besides being a friend, Julio Padovan, a Brazilian national, has been working as a full-time researcher at the Rockefeller University since 1996, and he's also an adjunct associate professor at the Department of Chemistry and Pharmaceutical Sciences at York College, CUNY, in New York City. He holds several academic degrees, and he is a lecturer for both the physical sciences and the Spiritist doctrine. Introduced to Spiritism at the age of 15, Julio dedicates his time to translating Spiritist books from Portuguese and French into English and disseminating it through lectures. He is particularly interested in studying and explaining the solid logical foundation upon which Spiritist concepts are built, as well as in creating a strong association among those very same concepts. And as usual, is a good friend, a brother for all of us. And tonight, or this afternoon into this evening, he'll be speaking about evolution, primordial emotions, and spiritual journey. Julio, please.
The sentence you are looking for is from my students. Welcome to the Terror Dome. Okay. I'm not looking to see if I won the lottery, okay? This is just to keep the time. Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters from the physical realm and also from the spiritual realm. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Leo, for the introduction. And today we are going to look at an interesting topic. It's actually quite a lot of things all melded together. It's not something I like to do, to be honest with you. I like to take only one aspect and just develop it. But these are things that are so intertwined that it's hard to pull them apart and just have 1 hour only on one of them. So we'll try this today and hopefully see what we can get from it. The evolution there is biological evolution. Primordial emotions is self-explanatory, and spiritual journey. So one of the reasons for this will become clear very soon. Now, this is the content of the lecture, so we don't have to go through all the items. I just want you to have it there just for completion. But don't worry, I know there are quite a few items there, but not all of them are very long. Let us start with a simple question. Monad or spirit? The first thing is, what is a monad? Think about this. We have adolescence, pre-adolescence. Children go to kindergarten, and before kindergarten, they go to pre-K. So the monad is nothing more than a pre-spirit. Whatever we were before being a spirit is monad. Now, if you don't like the word monad, which in Greek means the first one, the one that has no one before it, all right? If you don't like the word monad, you can call it pre-spirit. The differences in words is the differences are not important. What is important is that you understand that it's something before we were spirits. And why is this question so important? Well, think about it. I just asked Leo, and how many miles between Baltimore and New York? And it's like 187 miles, right? So imagine that you have 187 miles and you have to walk all of those 187 miles. None of us would actually do it, correct? So here's the thing, but you would walk about what, 187? About 2 yards, right? You would walk 2 yards. We have been spirits, okay, in comparison to monads, as 2 yards are to 187 miles, roughly. We have been monads, and if we are now going to use this conservatively, we are going to look at the data that we have from science conservatively. We have been monads for 3.8 billion years. That's right, billion, with a B, as in boy, or the equivalent of 3,800 million years. So monads, we have been monads for 3.8 billion years, but we have only been spirits for 2.58 million years. So about 1 in 2,000, the size or the amount of time we have been monads. And yet, what is the first book of the Spiritist codification? The one that we are studying in this center, okay? All Thursdays, on Thursdays, the Spirit's book. It doesn't say the Monad's book. It says the Spirit's book. So we have a lot of questions that we ask when we're studying that book, and I'm not saying the questions are bad, but they are very confusing because the question itself already starts with the wrong concept. For instance, I'll give you an example. Put away your rotten tomatoes, okay, and your rotten eggs. Does my little one, my little animal, my little pet have a spirit? You can't ask that question because it's not human. And we can only define a spirit when you're talking about the human body. It doesn't mean that the animal is completely devoid of anything, that the animal doesn't have support. It does, and we are going to see it just slightly about, we're going to discuss this just a little bit. But what is important for us to understand is this, that there is a difference between monad and spirit, and we have to accept that even if I don't like the word monad, that there was something before, and that there are certain things that only apply to like it or not. But there is one interesting thing that is like, that saves the day for us. Whatever we learn from the Spirit's book about this guy here, or about this stage of our evolution, also applies, whatever we learn also applies to the stage of the monad. There are, of course, certain peculiarities which we're not going to touch upon today because it's, they're very, very peculiar to one or the other. We're not going to make this difference, but it's important that we keep this in mind. So here's our model of the creation with the creator there, the creation, this big rectangular area here below the creator, right? And we have, by our own definitions, and the spirits have corroborated that, we divide this creation into a quintessential part, the one that is on the left of your screen. This part is non-material and non-physical. It's hard to describe things here because most of our vocabulary, if not actually, I should say all of our vocabulary is either material only or material and physical. Even the most abstract forms that we can use are related to this big area here, which encompasses the central portion, which is called material, and the right portion, which is the material and physical. And for simplicity, instead of saying material and physical, we're just going to say physical. But we have to remember that everything that is physical is also material. It's just that this material here is coarser, less refined, And this one here in the center is more refined than that side, than the right side. So both sides actually came from the same principle, the material fluid, the material principle, all right? So, and here I'm only going to represent animated matter. Why that? Why being so biased right from the beginning? For one reason, spirits can only be formed with animated matter. So if it's inanimate matter, it's a different story, which we're not going to cover today. It has a place, but not today. So by doing this, we create two natural divides. One over here between the quintessential and the material only, and another one here, the red dotted line, between the material only and the material and physical, or physical for simplicity. These two lines are hypothetical. They are didactical. We put them there because it's important for us to divide a big, more complicated problem into smaller parts. That's all, right? This is why when I represent these three, let's say, sections, the creation is only one. The creation is not really in three pieces. We divided it in three pieces because it helps us to divide a larger problem into smaller ones so we can study each one in its own way and then try to put them all together at the end and see if we can get a bigger picture of, of the whole thing. So here we have the physical realm and the extra-physical realm. The first confusion we have, which is quite difficult to tell people when they're starting to work in to study spiritism, right? The physical realm, of course, matches the physical world, matches the material and physical. But the extra-physical means everything that is not physical. So the extra-physical actually comprises not only the material only part, but also the quintessential. See, it goes from here all the way to the red line, to the red dotted line. That is already a point of contention, or a point at least of confusion. And here's why. We can either be reincarnated or we can be in the extra-physical realm, which for now I am not going to call spiritual realm. Because if I'm a monad, it's not called spiritual realm. It's called the monadic realm for me. All right? So I'm just going to call the extra-physical. So let us look here. I am Julio the essence, non-material, non-physical. Julio the essence is what I am. I may have a material body, which is depicted here. And these two things together is the discarnate being, the being that does not live in the physical realm, the being that lives in the extra-physical. When I, Julio the essence, create a material body for myself, and then a physical body, so I have a material body and I have a physical body, I am a triad, 1, 2, 3 pieces, very loosely speaking. And this whole thing, this whole ensemble, is the reincarnated being. So this is the way of looking at it that is generic. When I started my journey on this planet, roughly speaking, 3.8 billion years ago, I told you that we were monads, we were not spirits. Let us see why. See what I just did there? The essence remained essence, but what I had as the material body can now be either called the monadic body or the permonad. And when this monad was reincarnated, it would go from a 2-part being to a 3-part being. Essence, monadic body, permonad, and then a non-human physical body. So throughout our existence on this planet, until we associated ourselves to the physical body of a human being, we were called monads or pre-spirits. And by definition and just by correlation, the we had a monadic body, also known as permonad. And if we had a physical body, so we are reincarnated monad, that physical body, that physicality had to be a non-human body. We were associated, it's not that we were, okay? We were associated to a bacterial cell, to a virus, to an animal, to a plant, to a fungi, and so on and so forth. But we were never it. We are, verb to be, we are essences. And remember, either we are a discarnate being or we are a reincarnated being. We cannot be both at the same time, because that depends on having a physicality that we are associated to. Now, I told you that for 3.8 billion years, we were monads. But later what happened? At one point, 2.58 million years ago, the human beings have evolved from everything else that was going on the planet, biologically speaking, so we had a better tool. And once we began associating ourselves to the human beings, we got a promotion. And then that day, we got the name spirit. So this is the spirit stage. So now I continue to be the essence, but now I have a spiritual body or a perispirit. Either one is fine here. For the purposes of this lecture, we are not going to make the distinction here. You can use it as synonyms, perfect synonyms. This is the discarnate spirit, the discarnate being, also known as spirit, also known as the errant spirit. It's the spirit, now I can say, in the spiritual realm, also known as extraphysical. This is the part we are more familiar with. And this is the part that we study in the Spirit's book. The Spirit's book does not talk about the monads. When this spirit associates itself to a physicality, in this case, it has to be a human body. So then it goes from a dyad to a triad. Essence, spiritual body / perispirit, and then the human physical body. Here is the only time when we have, okay, or when we can use the word spirit or variation, spiritual, spiritualizing, and so on and so forth. So just to recap, we started with the monad stage, and for 3.8 billion years we're there, and then we went to the spiritual stage. This was not something that happened overnight. Like I went to bed as a monad and woke up as a spirit. This is a gradation process. It works very slowly. We put a date or we put a divide just to help us to elaborate better elaborate our hypotheses and to test them, and also to understand the whole point. What we take from this is how long we have been as monads in comparison to spirit. We have been monads 2,000 times longer than we have been spirits. Okay? So this is what is important for you to take from it. And everything that we study for the spirits, as in saying spiritual body or perispirit, or the association to a physicality, also applies to the monads. The difference is that for the monads, we don't associate to the physical body, the human physical body. That's all. We can associate to everything else except humans. The human body is very special. Biologically speaking, it is the Ferrari of all biological forms. It is not the most efficient. And if you have any doubts, just remember what happened during COVID. Okay? A tiny little thing called the virus could actually force us to meet our maker. Right? So it's not a question of being more efficient or the most efficient or the most this or that. No, it is just the most complex. Complex. It's not the largest either. Okay, we have animals that are much larger than we are. So the idea here is biological complexity. And the more complex something is, the more it takes for the part that controls it, which is the essence. Good? So this is what we have to remember. Yeah. Just give me 1 second. I'm like a Boy Scout. I have 8 batteries here. They have to work. It's working until now, it's fine. All right. And we're back. Sorry. So the essence over here, I'm just highlighting it. And this is the part that is always in control, whether it's the monad in the reincarnated form, or now in the spirit stage, but as an errant spirit, or the essence in the spirit form that is being reincarnated, so it is associated to a human body, or has a human body. Remember, we are not humans, actually. We are essences that are associated to the human body. Now, we each have our own human body. And that is important. There is a one-to-one relationship. But it's not that we are the human body. We have a human body. This is key. And the essence continues its evolution because it's what is the same throughout. Now, as I said, the human body is the Ferrari or the Cadillac or the Lamborghini, whatever name of a car. I'm not very good with cars, so I just want to convey a name that everybody can understand and relate to, knowing that it's very sophisticated, very complex. So that is what I wanted to convey here, that in order for us to reach the stage of being able to control this physical body, the body of a human, okay, we had to evolve for 3.8 billion years. So now if we want to go back to that question, does my cat or my dog or my parakeet or whatever, my fish, have, do they have a spirit? No. Do they have a monad? Yes, they do, but not spirit. It's not just a question of vocabulary. We are going to see that in order to be called spirit, we have to have certain achievements, okay, under us in our sleeve. Otherwise, we don't have, let's say, very loosely speaking, the merit to be called that. So to be called a spirit, in a way, is a compliment, because it means that we have gone through 3.8 billion years of evolution. We have done our homework, and we passed. Because in evolution, we only have, we only have the evidence of those who survived. Everything that did not survive, that went away very quickly, they're gone, and they're gone forever. So in order for us to get to this level, and in order for us to build a car, whatever sophisticated car you're thinking, you have to start small. You have to start with little screws, with little bolts, nuts, and you name it, right? So we started with things that were very, very small, had only one cell, for instance. Unicellularity means having only one cell. Pluricellularity meaning multiple cells, all right? To the point that it gets to us today, and we are a little over 100 trillion cells. Trillion, all right? It's quite a lot. But I also want to introduce to you a new word, sensors. So let us see what I want to convey with this. I will try not to use jargons and technical terms. At one point, in the warm waters of this planet, many, many, many billions of years ago, chemicals began to multiply, and these are molecules, tiny little molecules. You don't need to understand what this molecule is. That's why it's drawn so small. But the point is that at one point or another, and we can replicate this in a lab, this is the current hypothesis and model, these molecules, they got grouped together by some reason or another, which is not important for us today. But they got grouped like this, And eventually something else happened. Another molecule enveloped this bulk of a solution or a part of the sea or a part of a lagoon. So now you have all of these molecules here on the perimeter, and these molecules here, and you also have it on the front side here and to the back of the projection screen. Okay, so this is in 3D. I can only draw it in 2D. It's easier for us to understand. But the point being here that some of these chemicals enveloped others, creating for the first time two compartments, the outside and the inside. The chemicals that were inside, some of them were still also on the outside, but what's important is the chemicals that are on the inside, because at one point they learned how to duplicate themselves, replicate themselves. And then this whole structure here became, let us say, loosely speaking, a protocell, something that could make a copy of itself and move on, making copies and copies and copies and so on and so forth. They're not having babies. They don't have sexual reproduction. They make copies, primarily like going to a photocopier, like in the old days, and just putting it, the original there, and saying, I want 2 or 3 or 10 copies of it. Just do it. Okay? Nowadays, we just print it, 10 copies or 20 copies of something. But this is what this did. So now we have the outside and we have the inside. But this is quite interesting, but doesn't solve our problems because we need to eat. We need nourishment. This is not about what I want to eat. We need nourishment. So at one point, one of these chemicals on the outside, on the perimeter here, see this one that I highlighted in yellow? It got transformed, or it reacted with one of those that were in the inside, and it became sensitive to what was on the outside of this envelope, of this ensemble. We are not going to talk about jargons or anything. We are just going to call this a sensor. It was capable of detecting something on the outside. Don't worry about what is it that it was it was detecting. Don't worry. Let us be very generic here, generic, so that we can be generous with our minds, not struggle too much. It's a sensor. Imagine that this sensor here can tell by one way or another what is inside. Say, hey, there is food outside. There is nourishment outside. Absolutely useless. Number one, because sensors do not make decisions. Sensors basically will provide information. The stimulus that they collect from the outside, they relay to the inside. In the end, after 3.8 billion years, those sensors will make our senses. They will create our sensorial organs, or sensory organs if you prefer. But they don't make decisions. We do not see with our eyes, we do not hear with our ears, we do not smell with our noses. The ears, the eyes, and so on and so forth, they only collect information and they send to specific areas in our brain, and it's the brain that eventually smells or sees or has the feeling of touch and so on and so forth. It is the brain that processes the information. So what the sensor needs is a partner. All right? It's a partner, because the sensor alone, as I said, is useless. All you can say is, yeah, there's a lot of food outside, but I can't do anything about it. I don't even know if it's food because I cannot process the information. So it could be actually poison, and I would still don't know if it's food or poison. So there must be something else besides the sensor. Let us see what this something else is. But before we proceed, let me help you by simplifying a little bit. You see the envelope? I'm just going to represent by a shade of dark green there. But remember, these are chemicals. It's not really a ring. It's a ring of chemicals. And everything that is inside, just for simplicity, I'm going to represent with a light hue of gray. It's still the same thing. There is the outside, over here, or here, or here, behind, in the front. And there is the inside, everything that is contained by this dark gray circle. There is your sensor still pointing out because we want to know what's outside. We know what's inside. We want to know what's outside. So like I said, the sensor needs a partner. The first partner that we are going to get is something that will process the information from the sensor. What are sensors? Sensors are nothing more than chemicals, or if it's more than one chemical structures, all right, that detect other chemicals, in this case, on the outside. That's all they do. Imagine it's like a peeping Tom. It's like a pair of eyes. That's it. No, observing everything that is in the surroundings, in the environment. Here's environment, it's not ecology, ecological environment. Okay? But I said the sensor itself is not enough. So we get a processor. The processor will receive the information from the sensor. So these are also chemicals that receive the information from a sensor, and they are going to do something with this information. They are going to process it, and then they are going to relay it to another place. So what is this place? Well, let us think about it this way. The sensor says, hey, there is something outside. Sends the information to the processor. The processor, another chemical, says, that's not something, that's food. Or, watch out, that's not food, that's poison. Because the processing is done inside. Good, it's done by the processor. And you'll die anyway if it's poison. Because according to this, do you have a way of doing something? No. You don't have little swimmers. Oops. You don't have, anything to move away from it. You don't have any way of combating if there is poison outside. So what you need is what we call an effector. Effectors are other chemicals, also now on the outside, that can do something about. Maybe these effectors here will make this whole cell move in the direction of food, if it is food. If the processor is telling, no, it is food, it's good. And if the processor says, no, it's poison, it will move the whole thing, the whole structure, away from it. So we need at least these three. We need to sense something, to process what we are sensing, to have the information and the accuracy of the information, and then we have to do something about it, right? If we could not drive to a supermarket or walk to a supermarket, or nowadays we can also call, order in, we would starve. So the effectors are the ones that either place the call or that walk towards the supermarket or drive towards the supermarket. And we have many sensors in our cells, many processors, and many effectors. Now, this is for one cell. And I told you that throughout the 3.8 billion years, we evolved. And we evolved until we became a pluricellular organism. So here, I'm representing this huge circle here, a tiny little one, but I have many, many, many copies of it. At one point, because of the law of affinity, cells learned to work in tandem, as a group. No more, I live alone and I live on my own terms. No, I live in a group. But not only that, there was another thing that the cells realized that was fantastic and a lot more efficient as well. Cells realized that instead of having a sensor on each cell, each one of these little circles here would have its own sensor, which would make no sense, because think about it. Imagine the cells that are here inside. If you put a sensor here, it's not connected to the outside, right? So they decided that a block or a group of cells could act as a sensor. So now your sensor is multicellular. The same way, by the same token, a group of cells could act as a processor. And eventually, a group of cells could act as an effector. It's still the same game. The difference is very simple. This one is unicellular, only one cell. So each one of these, sensor, processor, and effector, is a molecule, it's a chemical. So this is a molecular principle or a molecular mechanism. But in a pluricellular one, what we have is cells acting as a sensor, cells acting as a processor, cells acting as an effector. So this is cellular. Move this further and further, and you get eventually to what I said, the Ferrari of all the biological forms. In the Ferrari of all biological forms, we started as a unicellular organism. We moved by many, many millions of years of evolution to a pluricellular organism. So the effector here is now a group of cells that act as an effector. And eventually, this is what we had, right? And eventually, what we have is by many, 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 many millions of years, the human form. And in the human form, if you're asking, who are the effectors? You have to walk to the supermarket. You need legs and bones, muscles and bones. So you need legs in that case. Or for me to hold this microphone, I need my arm and forearm. Again, muscles and bones. What are the sensors for us? The five basic senses. We know today that we have many more than that. The numbers go from 9 to over 30 senses, depending on how we define the word sense and what we are discussing. But for us, let's just talk about the five senses because it's easy for us to understand. And what works as a processor in our case? It's a specific cell type called a neuron. And because, remember, we can also have multiple cells working as a processor, we can have many, 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 many neurons in our brains, in our spinal cord, all the way down, and then in all the nerves that come out of it. So the processors here, the neurons in the human body are much more complicated, much more complex. Our brains have between 25 to 30 trillion neurons alone. That's the number of cells we have, which means that now we can process information at a level that is unparalleled in the biological world. We can take this to the next level. So what I'm going to show you here is just a quick depiction of all the types of sensors, or at least the basic types of sensors, processor, effector. So in this case, for instance, we are talking about the very basic ones that we see in most of the life forms on Earth, until we get to this level here, when we already have it in animals, like our pets, a cat, dogs, and so on. And even we do this. So even we have this ability to make a lot of neurons, put a lot of neurons together to process information. But here's an interesting thing. When we have this scenario here, for instance, which may or may not have a processor, it is possible. This is very, 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 very basic. These are for cells like bacteria, all right? So these are involuntary. What does it mean? They don't have any control. When a bacterium senses food, it moves in its direction. When a bacteria senses something as toxic, it moves away from it. But the bacteria doesn't classify it as food or toxic. The bacteria doesn't go to school to learn what toxicity is. The bacterium, for instance, does not have any, for instance, it won't move faster towards nutrient or more slowly. It won't be happy on one occasion and not happy on another. If it requires nourishment, it will take nourishment. If it does not require nourishment and it's surrounded by nourishment, it will not eat for tomorrow. It doesn't know. There is no voluntary, there is no decision-making process. The same thing here. Now, here we have something we call the reflex arc. What is a reflex arc? It is also something that is involuntary. And we have, most of us at least, have experienced it. You go to the doctor, and the doctor tells you that he or she is going to hit the patella of your knee, the bone that covers the knee, all right? And he or she tells you, it's not going to hurt or anything. I'm just trying to test your reflexes. And the moment that little hammer with a rubberized tip hits it, you jerk your foreleg. And there is no way on this earth that you can say, I won't do it. I will not do it. And the reason is very simple. As we get more and more sophisticated and complex, we no longer have only one processor or one processing unit. Very much like our computers who have the central processing unit and a lot of other processing units, we have the brain, which is the central processing unit. But we also have the spinal cord that comes down from the brain all the way to the back here at the bottom, just next to the sacral region, sorry. So this is an information that is received by the patella of the bone, is sent by the nerves all the way to the sacral part of your spinal cord, and it's the spinal cord that says, jerk the leg. Before it sends the information up by elevator all the way to the brain. So this is why it's called an arc reflex, but because the brain is the last to know, before it gets to the brain, the whole action, the effect is being taken care of, right? So this arc reflex is important in many cases. For instance, if you have a candle burning and you approach your hand and you put your fingers in the flame, you're going to burn yourself. So what you do is you just move it very quickly. That movement of pulling it away from the flame, it's an act of self-protection, and it's done even before your brain realizes, oh, it was too hot. The brain eventually gets the information, but it's the last to know. You have already pulled your arm away or your fingers away from it. So they are extraordinarily important. They were for our survival, so we could reach this position we have here today in the biological evolution. But the problem is, it's autonomic, no control. It's involuntary, right? Involuntary, that is the key. So now let us look at the last ones. Well, now we have, these are little depictions of the human brain, just to give you an idea, the parts that are involved. In the last two here, we begin to see voluntary action. In other words, it goes to the brain, and the brain will decide whether to act or not. The effector will only effect something if the processor says, go and do it. Make it so. Otherwise, if that command does not come from the captain of the ship, nothing is done. You don't weigh anchor. You don't change the sails. You do absolutely nothing. Unlike here, when you do it even before you tell the captain what's going on. So here, you tell the first officer, the second in command. You don't tell the first officer, the top one, the top dog. All right? But not here. And this is important because it is only here that we will be able to pay attention to the words, choose an effect. And in choosing an effect, we have emotions. Not before that. So, whatever emotion we are thinking about right now, Our animals don't have it. They don't. Now you're going to say, oh, but my cat, oh, my dog, oh, my fish, oh, my this. Like I said before, we know that it's a gradation. It is not like all or none. When this side happens, on that side it doesn't, or vice versa. But what I want you to understand, let us put this divide just for now. We're not going to mistreat our pets just because of it. But let us put this divide there just for now so we can learn black and white before we learn the shades of gray that exist between them. Let us learn the hues after we learn the pure colors on each side, or the luminosity or lack luminosity, and so on and so forth. So our animals, and let's say if you don't want to think about an animal, okay, let's think about a plant. A tree. A tree will not hate me, but a tree will also not love me, because a tree does not have a processor capable of processing sensorial information or sensory information and choose the type of effects to do. A tree may tell its leaves close or open or do this or do that, but that is biochemically built into its DNA. There is nothing that is, and the word here is extra physical about it. There is nothing in a tree or in a fungi or in an animal that tells that animal, that fungi, that tree to do it based on concepts that are not just from this world. Everything is wired in, either wired into the DNA or wired in because of learned behavior. Behavior here has been used very, very loosely, all right? As a rule, behavior is something that is used primarily for humans, right? But everything that we're discussing in terms of the voluntary and involuntary makes a division right here. We also have involuntary emotions, right? All of you are now alive, I hope. I need you to be alive until the end at least, right? But your hearts are beating. But you're not go beat, don't beat, beat, don't beat, beat, don't beat. Beat the beat. You are also inflating, deflating your lungs based on the movement of your diaphragm. If your diaphragm is moving up or down, you're not saying move up, move down, move up, move down. No, these are involuntary movements we have, and we cannot control them. And these are controlled by a portion of our brain that does not worry about higher functions, higher decision-making processes. It is specifically related to the back of the brain here, at the end of the brain, just before it becomes the spinal cord. This is why injuries to the nape, the back of the head, can actually make you have a heart attack. Actually, you don't have a heart attack in the sense of it. Your heart just stops beating. Or there is air, you have a perfect thorax, you have a perfect pair of lungs, but the lungs are not working because you're not telling the lungs, inflate, deflate, inflate, deflate. Actually, you're not telling your diaphragm to move up or down, up and down. So nothing happens, and you die from asphyxiation, for instance, in that case. And everything else is right. The whole apparatus is working perfectly. You just don't have the command. So these are the involuntary commands. When you drink, when you eat, food moves always from your mouth down. It's actually not right to say mouth down. Let us say from mouth to stomach, for instance. But if you are upside down, if someone plays a joke on you and hangs you upside down, and you drink, it will still, in this case, go upwards. It will still go from mouth to stomach, even though your stomach is at the top now, because you have something called a peristaltic movement that is also involuntary. It tells food and liquids to go from one place to another, but never backwards. So now that we have here this part that is voluntary, this is the part where the emotions are going to come. So let us clear this up a little bit. Nothing very fancy there. We just want to look at what we can talk about in terms of emotions. So we saw that everything that is involuntary is either related to a genetic imprint, to instinct, for instance, or the self-preservation, sense of self-preservation. And then on these last two, the ones that are about rationalization, we have what we are going to call emotions. So here, it's wired in our DNA. It's wired in our genetic material. We do it because it's there. We have no control over it. As long as we are humans and we have this body, we'll do it. Everything else on this side here, same thing. These are the automatisms, the reflex arcs. When that doctor comes in and he or she hits the patella in our bones, bingo, you're going to jerk that leg. There are things you can do with the eyes as well. There are also arc reflexes in the eyes. But the point is no control, right? So we have some that are longer than others. So this is why it's divided here in the long and short reflex arcs. Now here you begin the automatisms. These are the part where you tell your heart, beat, don't beat, beat, don't beat. Your diaphragm, move up, move down. So again, we're not talking about anything that is related to emotions. We're not here now. This is beginning to have some processing. And this processing is outside of the physical world. It is an extra physical processing. It is this extra physical processing that will lead us to fear, to anger, and the first thoughts. Because thought is a very abstract. Thought is not physical. So thought is not happening in the physical realm. It is relayed to the physical realm. But these are still fragmentary. This is where our dogs, our cats are, most of the animals. They do think. They do have certain level of primordial emotions. Now that you allow me to redeem myself a little bit, okay? But they still have fragmentary thoughts. Where if a dog sees the sky or it senses that the sky is at a certain point that is menacing or is going to get wet, you've never seen a dog take the next leap, the next stage, the next step and say, let me build a doghouse. The dog or the cat will not build a doghouse or a cat house or something to protect himself, an awning, for instance. Finally, we reach this stage. These are the higher order processing that is done by the cortex part of our brains. And this is where continuous thought, abstraction, intention, social concepts such as good, bad, goodness, evil, ethics. In order for us to talk about ethics, we need to know what intention is. We need to have the ability to abstract. To abstract is important because everything that is represented by morality or ethics, whatever you call it, is abstract. It has an application in real life, in physical life, but it's still abstract. This is the part that requires continuous thought, that requires the higher order processing, which you won't find in a plant, in a fungi. By the way, fungi are our closest relatives, biologically speaking. Okay? Just to let you know. So it's humans, then we're part of animals, basically. So animals in general, right? And then from that, the closest relative, okay, our closest relatives are fungi, not plants. Yeah. Fungi. Yep. So just to give you an idea, but all of these, they don't have the continuous thought. They're not capable of abstracting. So they're not capable of all of these things. So this is the location where our emotions are born. In order to be emotional, in order to manifest an emotion, we have to have a certain level of brain capacity. Let us call it a processing unit. I don't want to give technical terms. I want us to understand the bulk of it. We have to have a processing unit that is very, very, very sophisticated. And the only place we find this processing unit in the biological realm is in the human body. This is why it was so important to be called monad before and then spirit. It is only when we develop a certain level of cerebral cortex, of high processing unit, that we could actually be called a spirit, because it was only then that we could begin begin to address things like brother, sister, humanity, love, hatred, and so on. Emotions are born here. Think about it like this way. Have you ever seen a lioness? Because it's the lioness. The lioness is who that hunt, okay? Yeah, the males just sit there and eat and take the prime actually cut after it's the prey is killed. The lionesses have just killed I don't know, a gazelle or a zebra. Have you ever seen a lioness cry because it's just ended a life? Or say, I don't care about it, like being nonchalant or being dismissive? No, because the animals are acting instinctively. They are hungry. They kill because they need nourishment. You won't see, okay, again, because there is a little bit of a gradation, you might see a little, one example like in a million. But if you think of the number of species on Earth, and you think about the animals, for instance, in particular, you won't see them killing to store to sell to somebody else or to store for winter, in a sense. There is a killing because there is a need for nourishment. It's immediate and it's printed. But even this instinctive is very different. We can have two levels of it. I'll give you an example. When a snakeling eclodes from the egg, comes out of the egg, the first thing that the snakeling does is go hunting, go praying for its natural prey. Mama snake is nowhere to be found. Papa snake, nowhere to be found. That snake already has imprinted in its own DNA how to do it. So it's the instinct that I call physical or genetic instinct, built in, wired in. But here's an interesting thing. When a papa bear and mama bear are around and they have a cub, the cub will die because the cub knows nothing. Most mammalian animals, not reptiles, because snake is a reptile, right? So now you go further up on the evolutionary scale, the mammalian animals, as a rule, have to teach their young how to do certain things. So it is Papa Bear that is going to teach the cubs how to fish. Mama Bear is going to teach the cubs how to take care of themselves, and so on and so forth. But if they don't, if they are abandoned and there's nothing else, nobody else, no other animal to act as a surrogate mother, for instance, or a parent, I should say, or even a human being to provide nourishment for them, they will die then and there. So this is that instinct that will be developed by behavior, not by DNA imprint. So there you have it, fear, and it is the abstraction that will lead us to love, the third primordial emotion. So let us look at the emotions. But just before we talk about each one in particular, let us just understand one principle. Any interaction we have on this earth, whether as a monad or now as a spirit, is an experience for that individualizing entity that started with a monad. Today we can call it spirit. Doesn't matter what we do. The fact of being sitting down is already an experiment and an experience. Of breathing, another one. So some of these experiences we have done so many times, so often, they come natural to us, but they were, at first, new experiences. The exposure to stimuli, the exposure to the environment here again, not ecology, it's the outside, what is not me. Everything, the air that is immediately after me here, or any one of you in an interaction with another human being. Okay? It's an experiment that produces stimuli that I also capture and try to interpret. 3, stimuli can be processed either by an intermediary processing unit or by the central processing unit. So when that doctor comes in with that nasty look and hits my patella and my leg jerks, all right, that is being processed by the intermediary processing unit, my spinal cord. And my brain is the last one to know about it. Still gets to know about it, but it's the last one to have any saying. It doesn't have actually any saying on that one. But there are other things that are processed directly by our brains. So when I see something, as I am speaking, I can hear my own voice. I am also, I can smell if there's something else in the room. For instance, there's a piece of food, right? All of these things are processed by the central processing unit, the brains in our case. Psychological growth. I put the psychological there because I didn't want you to think that it's like growing up in terms of physical growing up, all right? Psychological growth comes from these experiences, okay? So what we have here is an engagement of the biological processors. I have no brain, I cannot grow psychologically. It is part of it, all right? It's part of it because it's the brain that will act as a processing unit for all the the stimuli that I collect around me. These experiences, whether we have a reason for them or not, is what we collectively call atavism. I can bring these experiences, the stimuli that I receive, and what I thought I wanted to do with them to another life. I can extrapolate because the processing is part here, part in the extra-physical realm. The essence is the part that processes the information at the highest possible level. The brain will do the processing that is basically physical. The eyes saw and the eyes did not see light. The light had this color or did not have that color, and so on and so forth. But in the end, giving a meaning to whether there was light or not, whether it was this color or not, goes all the way to the essence, and it's the essence that ultimately processes that information. So in order for us to have emotions, there has to be this extra physicality or this extra physical process. You put all of these together, and then you have how we have been growing and why we spend so much time as monads. Because as monads, having been created, or if I may, willed into existence by our Creator itself, monads were simple and ignorant. We are all simple and ignorant. So the first thing that is very shocking for us is this. I was no different than any one of you. None here was any different than me. We couldn't tell ourselves apart. Because think about it. How do you tell people apart? Oh, maybe this person has a different name than I have, or maybe this person's male, this one is female, or maybe this person has the hair parted this way or parted that way. We were monads. We didn't have hair. We were born simple and ignorant. Think about it this way. For me to be able to separate myself from any one of you at the very beginning, my Creator would have to have willed me into existence with either something extra that you did not get or something less that you did get. You follow me? But if that one way or the other, God would have, if He had done it, if it had done it, it would have been unjust, partial. So at the very beginning, we all look at one another, look in the, between inverted commas here, and we couldn't tell ourselves apart. We had to take 3.8 billion years in order to create conditions to separate ourselves from others. But then how is it possible? How is it possible for me to grow this way, psychologically, that one this way, and that one? Well, think about it this way. Imagine that you have here this environment. Some are close to the door. Some are closer to the spare room. Some to the restroom here. Some here to the pulpit, right, or to the lectern. So we as we are positioned, we may learn different things in each position. Now, it doesn't give me an edge. It just gives me, for that reincarnation process, monad or spirit, a knowledge that I acquired because of these surroundings. In the next reincarnation process, I will move towards the door. I will move towards the other, the room, the spare room, or towards the lavatories, and so on and so forth. So I can move around and then eventually learn everything. Hence the amount of time. And 3.8 billion years is a lot of time. A lot of time. But divine justice has allowed us to experience all the possibilities so that what we do with them is what makes us distinct. It's not the fact that I have missed that, and the other. But you have to understand that the very first reincarnation process we had, we may have started with a little edge here, there, and there, because those next to one place learned that thing that is related to that place. Those next to another place learned something else from that place as well, so on and so forth. Right? It is now that we are sentient beings, that we have the ability to reason, that we are more responsible for what makes us different from one another. Until we got all the way to the last animal before going into the human form, we didn't have any responsibility. Have you ever seen a psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist treating an animal that says, oh, I am a hyena. I don't know how to laugh. Oh, the other animals like me laugh a lot. No, they don't, because they don't even know how to compare themselves. They act in that biological instinct or even physical or biochemical instinct, which is wired into their DNA. They are hungry, they prey or they hunt. They need nourishment, they go after it, and so on and so forth. But they don't store excess nourishment for later. They don't sell it. They don't have anything that relates them to a sense of a community in the sense that we do. That brings us to fear. Let us define fear for the purpose of this conversation. We are going to define fear here as a gap that exists between my awareness of certain stimuli and what to do about them. Let us put this in better words. I am a caveman. Remember, for this now I have to be associated to the human form. So let me go back to the first humans, not even a caveman, the ones that were nomads, that were just, hunting in the prairies, for instance. As that very primitive human being, right, I see lightning or thunder. That's the stimuli, right? Either the light and the noise. And then, what do I know about lightning and thunder? Nothing. Just absolutely nothing. Imagine how fearful they must have been, our first cousins. You see something. You have the senses. You hear them. In this case, you hear, right, the thunder, and you know nothing about them. So you are absolutely terrified. But not today. I'm not talking about pathological situations, phobias, all right? We're going to be talking about general cases. So today we know that when there's lightning outside, when there is thunder outside, we are safe, because even if we don't have a technical vocabulary to describe one or the other, we already know that they're not going to hurt us, but they didn't. So fear exists to a certain degree because of this gap between what we sense with our 5 basic senses and what we can do about it. So initially, what was it that they knew to do? Run from it, or be scared, be paralyzed. That was all that they had. But the more we learn about something, the more we investigate, and eventually, even those first hominids, They realize, wait a second, I hear it, I see it, it is scary, but I haven't been hurt by it. So eventually, they have so many of these experiences that they may say to themselves, okay, it is kind of loud, it is kind of intimidating, but nothing happens to us. So perhaps, just perhaps, it doesn't hurt us, no matter how intimidating, how loud, how noisy it is. So, but you need the experimentation, the experiences in life. So this is fear. It comes from our interaction with the world. The fear of being mauled by their prey as opposed to being the opposite. They go after something to hunt it and end up being the hunted, being the prey. So they learn from these experiences, right? They also learn from the size of the animals. Same thing. So this is your fear. But then you begin to create tools and perhaps you realize, okay, I know that mammoth is much bigger, much heavier than I am, but I have a spear. It doesn't. As long as I don't get trespassed by the tusk, I'm okay. Because I'm not going to end up under it for it to be and to stomp me to death. So you begin to find ways to counteract that amount of ignorance that you came with, that you started with. And then whatever you feared in the first place is no longer so bad. Now, fear will never disappear for one reason. Because built into fear, there is the sense of self-preservation. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. And we have already seen these in very small communities, especially in Japan recently with the 2011 tsunami. We are not very sociable individuals. We should be more sociable. We should be more loving to one another. So imagine now that you live in an area that is prone to seismic repercussions, seismic troubles. So let us call two fears. You have one, the fear of losing your life because your house may just come down falling on your head, right? And that is what I'm going to call the fear that comes from the sense of self-preservation. You don't want to die. Whether you believe in spiritism, reincarnation, it doesn't matter. You just don't want to die. As a rule, non-pathological individuals do not want to die. But you also have another fear that is not dependent on necessarily, it's indirect, it's not dependent on the earthquake. The earthquake only acts indirectly, it's a trigger. You think, for instance, depending on the society that you live, it's a cutthroat society, for instance, like most of ours these days. And when I say this, not just here where we live, anywhere, right? You think about it this way, will I be able to recover my house, a place from a roof over my head? Will I have something to eat afterwards? But we have seen in certain situations where it's not that the society or the group, the social group, rallies together to help someone after the catastrophe. They already know that before a catastrophe even happens. So the individual fears the catastrophe less, because the individual is only fearing the catastrophe up to the point of losing his or her life. The individual does not have what I call the social related or the society related fear. In our society, if something happens right here, there is an earthquake, right? You don't know if the government is going to help us. You don't know if your neighbor is not going to loot your house just because you're not there. We fear for everything. We fear if we are going to have enough food because people are going to rush to supermarkets and take everything away. We just saw it when it happened during COVID, right? So this is the difference in fear. So there are certain types of fear that we cannot control, the fear, because it's built into us, the self-preservation, and others that we could if we were more caring, more gentle. And we see in some small communities, we have records of these things happening these days, when individuals feel comfortable, even when they live in places that are prone to this or that tsunami or an earthquake and this and that, or mudslides, because they know they have seen so many times happen to other individuals that the group rally together to help them. So they don't fear that part. So this is the difference that I want to convey in terms of fear. Let us see now the next one. You understand why fear is the first one, right? It's really attached to the sense of self-preservation. So it has to be the first one. Because the sense of self-preservation is not rational. It's built in. We don't rationalize it. We don't try to explain it. We just have it. And even animals have it because it's somewhat involuntary. Now, the next one is anger. Well, fear tells you that there is an imbalance between what you know and the stimuli that you're receiving, correct? And eventually you experience this enough times, oftentimes, that you have some form of frustration for not being able to do anything about it. When we are now progressing in our journey, this is the stage of the predominance of the ego, not the ego as we use it willy-nilly in our daily conversations, but the ego of that Freud used to describe the psychoanalysis of the human mind. Okay? Remember, we had the id, according to Freud, which is the very instinctive in us. The id could be, loosely speaking, the interpretation of the sense of self-preservation. Then there comes the ego. The ego is not necessarily mean, but the ego thinks about itself. So now, if I have this difference between stimuli and what I can do about it, and I don't want to cope with it, I show no willingness to do it, there is going to be a level of frustration. Because I am expecting something, I want an outcome, and I don't get it. And that leads me to anger. Anger/hatred. The hatred and anger, they can develop, okay? So this is the primitive anger, primitive hatred. I'm not talking about that calculated hatred that allows someone, for instance, to create a bomb to send to some place. That is hatred, yes, but that is a sophistication that had to evolve as well. Even emotions evolve. I'm talking about the very first hatred we are talking, we are observing in our biological evolution. Why is it that I see thunder, that I experience lightning, and I can't do anything about it? That eventually gives us the very first aggressions towards the unknown. And this is why, in a mixture of hatred and fear, we create the first ideas of gods that were all very mean, because they all came from the natural world. And there, I could not understand the natural world, or could I do anything about it? Again, it's a vicious circle, because I did not know anything about it, right? Because you can only do something when you understand at least a little bit. So, there it is, right? We have the hatred now, and like I said, these are going to evolve later on. We are going to see that we can have as a calculating hatred, as we see in some of the most egregious crimes these days. So now we have, 2.58 million years of fearing and hating. And eventually, about 5 to 6,000 years ago, something happened. We acquired some stability in our lives. We became sedentary. We became not really sedentary, but we began agriculture. We began to stay in one place as opposed to always on the move after food, whether the food was things from trees or shrubs, or even killing animals. So this allows us some time to ponder, some time to even develop arts. With arts came the concept of aesthesis. It's not just a question of building a lancet to kill an animal, but to make that lancet shiny, or to make the lancet more efficient. So all of these are still processing performances of our processing unit. And in doing so, we get the first glimpses at beauty. We see this a little bit with Moses, later on with prophets, and particularly in the first 500, the last 500 years of the Greeks, in the Greek civilization just before our master, especially during the golden century, or the century of Pericles in Athens, when the concept of aesthesis, of beauty, was quite important. Why beauty? This is physical beauty I'm talking about. I'm not talking about anything moral or elevated. I'm talking about physical beauty. But we had to touch that physical beauty in order to be able to abstract. Because in the end, love is the abstraction of that beauty that we can touch. Love is now the conquest, or the accomplishment, I should say, not conquest, the accomplishment of the self. Now I'm moving towards more Joanna de Angelis or Jung nomenclature. The self, the thing that places us in a group, not anymore just, oh, I am here, but I am here with everybody else. I am a member of this bowling team. I am a member of this school. I am a member of this spiritist center. I'm this of this society, this city, this country. The self sees the individual inserted in some form of a community. It is this that allows us to abstract, go outside of ourselves. If we want to go back to Freud, that would be related to the superego. The superego is the one that sees still the ego, but sees the ego in a context, no longer just the ego. So here we have the concept of beauty elevated all the way into the extra-physical. That is when morality comes in, ethics comes in. They came after the concept of love. Jesus Christ, when he was here on earth with us, could not have told us about love before the Greeks, before some of the prophets, because we had to first touch something physical that was equivalent to that love. The aesthesis, the beauty of a statue, of a painting, of something, not obsession, but the care with the details of the physical, the human form. When we begin to draw humans the way that the Greeks in particular did, we were actually being candid in saying, we are beautiful. And isn't that the first part of a sentence that say, why are we killing one another? So you have to start somewhere, and you have to start with something that first attracts the physical senses, and then you extrapolate. And you can only extrapolate, and this is why the animals cannot do it, because we have that level of abstractiveness. We can abstract things. Oh, if I am beautiful physically, I must be beautiful in what I do. And what I do is now abstract. It's not necessarily an action that I carry out physically. So this is the order of the emotions. This is why we have first fear, because it's still linked somehow to our instinct, or to our involuntary actions. And then we have hatred, because it is that frustration, that level between what I know and what I am experiencing, and not being able to cope or do anything about it. And eventually, love. Now, here's an interesting thing. Because of these definitions, love does not kill fear. We will always have fear, because we can always die, right? Now I will leave the question for the question that you're probably thinking, but what about if I'm only a spirit now? I know I don't die, right? So I'm going to leave that for the discussion later on. Okay, this is my bonus for all of you. So I will say there's still fear. Yes, fear not, but there's still fear. Okay, there is fear there. And love, as such, love will not actually block fear completely. There will always be a little remnant of fear, which is the remnant that what remains is that's associated to the sense of self-preservation. But love can actually relate to hatred and complement it. In complementing hatred, love teaches hatred to change its polarity. Because remember how we defined hatred? We did not define hatred as something. We defined hatred as nothing. We define hatred as, I don't want to put any effort into learning something or coping with something. Or I define the hatred as I not wanting to do anything about it. So it's a lack of action. So what love does is teach that individual to do something. Love can countermand hatred. It cannot countermand fear completely, but it can countermand hatred completely. It can flip it completely, which is why the spirits tell us that it's a lot easier to have someone who hates converted into someone who will learn to love, at a universal level, than to get someone who's lukewarm, doesn't hate, that doesn't love either. Trying to get that individual to move in one direction or another is a lot harder than taking someone who is now filled with hatred. Because we say filled with hatred, but hatred is nothing. The individual is actually empty, and love pours something in. This is very precious, because we have this feeling when we have to address someone who is very hateful of this, that, or the other. We think that the individual is already filled up, basically. No, what the individual is saying is, help me, I am an empty vase. So if we can approach that individual in a gentle, empathetic way, we are going to fill that individual with love, and will, in that sense, countermand or just do the opposite of everything that individual had been doing until now. So I hope you enjoyed it. This is the idea that I wanted to present. I know that, especially when we talk about the biological evolution, there were leaps and bounds. We're playing hopscotch as if we were jumping from America to the Europe. These were not little hops. These were monstrous ones. But I tried to focus on what was important for us. Okay? So thank you so much for your attention, your presence, and we can have some questions now.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. I know everybody was fearful that we were whispering over here, but I was asking consent, okay? So let's.
Lock the door and charge it.
And you will love what I proposed for us to do later on. So yes, I would like to thank you first of all. Yes. I'll ask. I don't know if you want to. Is that good, Daniel? So we can post the questions there. Thank you again, Julio, for this amazing talk and this amazing knowledge that we have received as well. It's I was sharing with a lot of my friends and family members as well, because it is definitely something that we would like to. I'll stay here so Daniel doesn't. Daniel's like, Leo, where are you going? So that we can learn about ourselves, right? And in the And what we would like to ask is that we put into practice, as always, what we learn and how these emotions, through our evolutionary path up to now, can guide ourselves and one another as well, right? And I have a lot of questions. I know we all do. We'll try to make it quick because of time. What I was actually proposing to Julio is that for some of us who may not get our questions or comments answered, that you can send it over to us and we'll send it to Julio, and Julio will address them in a form of a video, and we'll have the answer there. So what I would like to do, maybe take a couple questions here and take a couple questions over online as well. And then again, if you don't have your questions answered, we'll address a later one. Deal? I hope you love the idea. Don't go all once. Who would like to go first? Okay. So I have Alba and I have Kirsten back there. So we'll start with Alba.
Julio, thank you so very much. In my mind, when you were talking, I saw like a National Geographic documentary with illustrations and everything. It was precious. Thank you so very much for the journey. So I'm thinking in the next level of humans, as we were moving from the monad and the spirit, and then we need this human body, but the essence, the spirit, is in evolution, and therefore we will need a better Ferrari than this one, right? So I'm thinking what it will be like at the next step in evolution in regards a body. Are we thinking a bigger brain? I don't know if my question makes sense or not, but we know that currently there are spirits that are more advanced than us, that are reincarnating in these human bodies, and the human bodies, they don't process, I think is the word. Same, they're not good for them to do everything that they need to do as more evolved spirits. Thank you.
Short answer, I don't know. Downright honest, okay? What we know, for instance, that this is not the end, because we see a lot of spirits writing about Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, for instance, and other spirits that moved on and were given the opportunity to reincarnate in other worlds. Earth right now has to continue the biological evolution. The Ferrari has to have one bolt put on at a time, or some bolts replaced, but it has to continue evolving according to the physical laws, which are a subset of the divine laws. So if we are going to reincarnate into something different than the human body already here, I don't know. We don't have that information. We do know that some spirits have evolved so much here that this physicality was not enough for them anymore, and they were given the opportunity, not permission, opportunity, because of what they accomplished, to continue someplace else. But then we have no information from that either. What we know is that it's a never-ending evolutionary process.
Thank you so much. Great talk, Julio. It's on. So first question. So you walked us through, under normal circumstances, how through the evolution and how the emotions come about, very, very nicely. Do you have another talk that's sort of like a part 2, or maybe this is a hint, where you could kind of walk through something similarly, but what would happen in the instance when pathological states happen, and how that would translate into us understanding, how pathological states and emotions and things of that sort kind of happen. There's that. Put this aside for 1 second. The second thing I wanted to say, it makes complete sense when you said that love doesn't take away fear, because then the quote came to me, I think it's from the Bible, where Jesus said it, that love covers a multitude of sins. It's never that love takes it away, love, demolishes, it covers. So it's something really interesting. Anyway, I've just made me think that, and I wanted to share that. I thought that was really, really nice. So thank you so much.
With respect to the first question, yes or no? No, in the sense that if you ask me now, no, of course. But I do have certain things that I have done before in terms of the death and or pathological versus normal, non-pathological cases that I could, let's say, give it a twist to just say that this is part 2 of this lecture. Yes, that's true. Yeah, no, I knew it. I knew the trap was set. You know, I had one of my both feet already inside of the bear trap, and I knew it's gonna snap. Just waiting for it. It's gonna snap. The other part about love, what I wanted to present, especially talking about love, is the fact that we have this very sweet, very lovey-dovey idea of love sometimes, and I just wanted to move away to show that love also has to be reasoned. We had to reason before we could love. Love is not something that the Creator gave to us, and we are just like a puppet. Oh, I have to love, I have to love. No, I have to choose to hatred, and I also have to choose to love. But because fear has that part that is also related to the sense of self-preservation, fear is different. I cannot choose to have fear or not. But I can choose, and I have to choose to have hatred, to express hatred. I have to choose to express love. So love is a rational, reasoned decision, which is why animals, I'm not being nasty to them. This is why they cannot choose to express love or hatred, because they cannot reason. So when we say that it covers a multitude of sins, but think about it. Imagine the sin as hatred, just very loosely speaking, right? It covers something that was what? Naked, exposed, empty.
Thank you, Julio. Daniel's probably going to hate me, but I can see the faces when they're raising their hands. So we have one more question online, and then I'll go to Paula, and then is that good, Daniel? 3 more to finalize it? All right. So can you post the question online? From Yvonne. Hey, Yvonne.
Okay. Hello, Yvonne. Thank you for the question.
Are monads still being created?
These are the types. This is the type of question I always like to make a little joke. Allow me. Well, next time you meet your maker, ask it. I can't tell. Look, we do have that God creates always. It never stops. So if I had to guess, be careful, guess, I would say yes, they are still being created. All right? Now, if you look at all the animals on Earth and all the other forms of life that are non-human, they have to have a monad. They are biological beings that are using animated matter. So they have, if God is not creating new ones, that I cannot say, but at least that we still have monads around us. Yes. But it's a good question. The joke is not to demean it or anything, please.
Paula and then Agnes.
I have to push this
So,
in.
Paula.
You're good.
Hi, thank you very much. I just want to piggyback onto Kirsten's question because I'm interested in that last section of the evolved individual with abstract thought on the topic of good and evil and ethics. So I'm interested in what seems to derail some people in that area if you're looking at some common definition of what is good and ethical. And the only thing I can think of so far from, the talk or just starting to think is how they perceive their experiences, because we see how powerful your experiences are in shaping who you are. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Great question. So let us do a quick experiment here. Let us imagine that we live alone. I mean, no cell phones. Okay? I said alone. Okay? No cell phones. So we have nothing. We don't have TVs. We don't have cell phones to work with. We don't have computers. No other human being. If you do something, can you say that it was good or bad? No. You don't have the external standard to compare something to. We only compare things because we live in a society, in a group, and then we have certain traits which change from time to time, from culture to culture. So concepts of good and evil, as we would love them to, even though we would love them to be like stable and unchangeable, no, they're not. They change in time. What is immoral or amoral in one time is not, or in one culture is not in another. So good and evil are going to be, let's say, for lack of a better word, the concept of the majority in a group, right? The concept of the majority. Now, why do people derail? Well, think about the ego, right? Again, the ego, according to the psychoanalysis model of Freud, it is that part in us that experiences the world, everything around. It is the part that takes it inwardly and then compares whatever new experience we have just had to a set of standards that are internal. Not law. I'm not talking about the law, human justice. That are internal. But here's the problem. As I compare, I'm going to be the bad guy here. Let us say that I have an experience, and I now take that experience or the outcome, and I compare to my internal clock or my internal set of standards, which is my conscience, by the way. And I don't like it. I have two choices. I say to my conscience, okay, make room for a new data, a new piece of data. Make room for new information and reformulate something that you have. Or I do what most of us do very, very well, right? We rebel against it. Now that form of let's say counteracting behavior goes as far as one point, and eventually we derail. When the force that we put to go against it is more than what the group is willing to accept, that is the derailment. So it's the criminal, it is the or the individual that foments scandal wherever he or she goes, and so on. Or even certain mental processes, mental perturbations, because you feel yourself incapable of expressing what you want to do or wanted to express. So you are in, it's not denial. It's not just that you're saying, I don't believe it or I don't want to believe it. You're basically saying, your conscience is telling you, make your conscience say, I want room here to add this new experience. And you say, no, I don't want to, because I know that if I have to, in order for me to create room for the new experience, I have to do work. Okay, for us to grow goes through pain, through suffering. It's not the physical pain of stubbing your toe or suffering in the sense of being insulted. No, it's a suffering in the sense that we have to remodel what we are, not what we have, what we are. And that asks us, it's quite a lot actually. But the thing is, why is it that we do? Some do, at least, because we somehow envision the future outcome, and we say it is worth it. But if we behave like little like toddlers, right, when they have a little tantrum, then we are always stuck in that position. So, a great question. Thank you.
Thank you again, Julio, for this amazing. We'll stop right here because of time. And as we asked, our dear friend Agnes, by the way, she withdrew her question. She said it was already answered, so I'm not skipping her. But she will send something to Julio later on as well. But I hope everybody can take this to heart and really apply in our daily lives. What I would like to do is to propose for everyone to work with us as we ask Kirsten to do a short visualization in lieu of our passes tonight because of time. But obviously the environment is that we make here is a collective environment, obviously, that each one of us can help and guide ourselves into this visualization and receive the passes as well. So Kirsten, if you can.
All right, folks. So join me now in finding yourself in a comfortable position, uncrossing your arms and legs. Just join me briefly, taking a deep breath in through your nose and then exhale through your mouth. With gratitude in our hearts and our minds for our dear friend Julio, for this enlightening talk, lifting our minds and hearts to our divine creator, to our master Jesus, to our spirit benefactors or guardian angels. We thank you for the blessing of this evening to be amongst one another, learning and growing, fortifying our minds and hearts. Let us now take this moment to feel these loving vibrations from our great Creator pour down in heavenly ways over each one of us, bringing us balance, bringing us comfort in the depths of our being. May we feel this as if it were an embrace, a deep, loving embrace from a mother or a father. Imagining someone who cares so deeply for us beyond measure, space, or time. A love that we cannot yet fully fathom, but yet may it cover us like a warm blanket, encouraging us on our journey in this lifetime. Wherever we may find ourselves, in gratitude once again for these healing moments that we are able to experience. Let us take with us these healing vibrations, this sense of comfort, faith, and hope as we go on the rest of our evening and for the rest of this weekend and the week to come, and the moments after here. As we come to a close of our meeting, may we be intentional when we drink the blessed water, allowing it to draw us closer to our divine purpose, to our humanity, to that divine love that is always there, but sometimes forgotten. We thank you, our dear Master Jesus, holding you close to our hearts, always. And so be it. All right, dear friends, please stay in your seats as we hand out the water by the volunteers.